What's up guys, it's Avery here. As you know, I love to invest in real estate, and as I've said before, there are so many benefits associated with investing in property. And the tax benefit known as the 1031 exchange, which is one of the biggest benefits for investing in real estate, is about to go away. If this is your first time to the channel, or if you're returning, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and tap that notification bell so you don't miss out on any tips for investing in real estate or things that you can do with your money in order to build your wealth. Today's video is about the 1031 exchange, and that name comes from the IRS code book 1031. And the 1031 exchange is pretty simple when you look at it from a high level overview. Pretty simply, you buy a property, and when you sell that property at a profit, instead of paying taxes on that profit, you put that profit into another building tax-free. Looking at an example, if you purchased a duplex for $400,000 and then 10 years later sold it for $1 million. So instead of paying tax on that $600,000 of profit, which would be a pretty good portion of tax going to the government, you can take that $600,000 and defer those capital gain tax into another building. So you could take those $600,000, locate a 20-unit building that is worth $1.2 million, and purchase that building that will give you more cash flow and potentially better appreciation. So it's a great way for investors to go from smaller units and scale up. And it's been a really great thing for people to do in order to build their rental portfolio. The other thing that is great about the 1031 exchange is it allows you to take anything that you depreciated from your prior property and defer it into the next property. So if you capitalized your roof because you fixed it for $10,000 and each year you've taken a deduction, then all of those deductions, rather than paying them off in tax when you sell your property, you defer them into the next property. And the reason why this is okay and that the government is okay with this is it allows investors to scale up and can create a better economic effect and more jobs and all of the things like that. But eventually when you sell the property and don't keep exchanging up, then you pay all of the tax based on everything that happened between that duplex. Maybe you move from a duplex to a 10 unit, to a 20 unit, to a 50 unit. So if you sell that 50-unit building and don't keep exchanging up, then you're eventually paying all of the tax from all of those prior buildings upon sale of that 50-unit building. The kicker of this 1031 exchange is that you can pair it up with something called the step-up basis tax. So instead of selling that 50-unit like I gave in my example, you could pass on that 50-unit building to your family. So this is what creates a lot of generational wealth without having to pay a ton of taxes. So say we went from that 2-unit duplex that was $400,000 and we scaled all the way up into a 50-unit building with a few purchases and a few exchanges, and now we have a $10 million 50-unit building. Instead of your kids, when they inherit your building, paying the difference between $10 million and that $400,000, which would be a really big tax bill, because if you die, there's not just those things to worry about, but then they would have to pay your tax. Then instead of them having to pay all of that tax, from the 10 million to the 400,000, their step-up tax basis is now at 10 million. So they're starting at 10 million, and if they decided to sell this building when it's worth 12 million, they would only pay $2 million in taxes rather than on the full difference between that 12 million and 400,000. Sorry if that was confusing or if you weren't able to follow along, but pretty simply it is if you buy a building and then you keep exchanging up to new buildings, you don't have to pay tax on those exchanges while you're alive and on all that profit. And then once you pass away, you can pass on those properties to your kids without them having to pay tax as well. So theoretically, if everyone from you to all of your heirs are super interested in real estate investing and they know what they're doing, you could create generational wealth tax-free basically forever. Now the step-up basis does have a $23 million limit, so if you passed on $30 million of property to your kids, they would have to pay tax on $7 million of that $30 million. So it's not just nothing, and this really does only affect the deca millionaires. For someone like me who's hoping to maybe get 30 to 50 units throughout their lifetime and pass that on through generational wealth, I probably would never hit that $23 million threshold. The other thing that's important to know is the step-up basis tax does not just include real estate. It would also be for stocks, for bonds, for a YouTube channel that's doing extremely well because everyone keeps smashing the like button and subscribing. So it's for everything that could be considered an asset that you could pass on to your kids. So what's changing? What's the plan? The new administration is hoping to change the rules around the 1031 exchange. So they don't actually want to get rid of it, but because of all of this infrastructure bills, paying for community college, and giving people more access to various items that are paid for by the government, it has to come from somewhere. All of this money that the government is printing isn't just made from nowhere. It has to get paid back somehow, and usually that's through tax. So right now, there is no limit to the number of 1031 exchanges you can do, and there is no limit to the amount of profit that you can defer from one property into another. Now with this new proposal, there would be a cap of $500,000 before you start getting taxed. So back to my duplex example that you're purchasing for $400,000 and selling for $1 million, you still would only have to pay tax on $100,000. So whoop-de-doo, that's not a big deal. This person's making $600,000, $500,000 of it, which is tax-free. So they're still gonna be doing fine. That's a lot of money. Who cares? Boo-hoo. They should pay some of their taxes. This would mean on that duplex that's $400,000 going all the way up into $10 million, your kids would have to pay a $9.6 million tax bill. And that could be an absolute logistical nightmare dealing with the death of someone as well as paying all of these taxes, the two things that are certain in your life. So instead of them going to that $10 million threshold where they're stepping up their tax basis there and starting from scratch, they'll have to pay all of that tax on that $9.6 million. So pretty much this will incentivize those people who are inheriting that property to sell the property, because that is a huge tax amount. You might as well sell it because you're gonna have to get that taxable amount from somewhere. Unless you're in an ultra wealthy family and you want to keep that building for whatever reason, there would not be any particular reason other than you love that building to sell it based on this new proposal. So now that we have the information and I've provided it to you in the most unbiased way that I can, let's talk about some of the economic effects that'll happen if this 1031 exchange goes from how it currently is to how it's proposed to be. So the first thing that happens when someone 1031 exchanges their duplex into that 10 unit, there's a whole trickle down economic effect that can create jobs and help strengthen the economy of the area. Pretty similarly to if you smash the like button for my channel, I'm not just going from 999 to 1,000 likes, but there's a whole trickle down effect where the algorithm will push my videos to more people and it'll make the world a much better place. So every time there's a real estate transaction in a 1031 exchange, people are going to be making money. And there's not just going to be one purchase of real estate, but two, because you're selling your real estate and buying some more real estate. So the person who would be buying your duplex would have to pay for the agent, any title, attorney, escrow, any of the fees associated with closing a property, as well as you would be doing the same. You would have your lawyer fees, you would have the escrow company, title, any surveys, anything that is associated with buying a property. And all of that money that is given to those trades that are associated with your purchase on that property is going to be taxed. The other thing that happens is when you purchase a property, the property taxes will most likely increase because the value of the building has increased. So if that 10 unit was originally purchased for $500,000 10 years ago, and you're now purchasing it for $2 million, the property tax value will go from $500,000 to that $2 million amount, which will allow the government, the local government, to have more tax revenue for local things like the community, for schools, for whatever funded programs that they need. So if there's less 1031 exchanges because people don't want to put their money into them, the tax basis for those properties will stay where it was, and there'll be less property revenue going to the local governments. And not only do the people who are directly related with the transaction, like those attorneys, like the escrow, like the title companies, all of those people for the purchase to actually be completed, but typically when someone buys a new building, they're going to be doing some renovations and fixing them up as well. So you're going to be paying for plumbers, for electricians, for contractors, all of those people who, when they earn that income, will be taxed, as well as it's going to be able to help grow the economy in the area because you're basically creating jobs by purchasing a new property. And like I said, it's not just one transaction, it's two transactions. So you're going to have the duplex that you sold and someone's going to be fixing that up so that it can increase in value. And then your new 10 unit building that you bought, you're also going to fix up so that it can increase in value while you're paying for these people to do the work on your building. So there are a lot of positive effects that take place when there's a purchase or sale of a real estate property, and all of these are taxable events. So something that will need to be asked is all of these taxable events that are associated with selling and purchasing property, is that going to be greater or less revenue than capping the 1031 exchange at $500,000? And essentially that's an impossible question to answer until we actually have gone from the current world to the proposed world. Another thing that's really important to note is not everyone takes advantage of this 1031 exchange. Not every single real estate investor is going to keep continuing to 1031 exchange up into new and better buildings. Actually, about 88% of those 1031 exchanges are eventually taxed. So not necessarily do they sell that duplex and then pay tax on it, but maybe they sell that duplex, get into a 10 unit and then the 20 unit, and then after the 20 unit, the real estate investor fully sells it and then realizes all of that tax eventually at that time. So only 12% of people are really only utilizing this 1031 exchange and stepped up tax basis to its fullest potential. So the 1031 exchange will have a lot of positive economic effects for the specific area. And some things that it will do that could potentially hurt the area is it would de-incentivize those people to sell their buildings. Essentially, you would want to just keep your building as is. You'd have no real incentive to make it worth more value because you're not eventually going to sell it. You could have incentive to make it worth more value so you could cash out refinance, which is still a tax-free event, but it's not going to create all of these other transactions and all of these other taxable events. And you may not want to fix it up so much, so you're not going to be paying for a various amount of trades. You're pretty much just going to hold on to this building. And what happens when these people and these investors are going to hold on to their building rather than putting them onto the open market is it's going to create more of a supply shortage in the market. And as you know right now, there is a crazy supply in the housing market that's super low with all of this pent-up demand. And if this is added to it, it's potential that all of these investors who want to scale from their 2, 3, 4 unit building to a 10, 20, 30 unit building are not going to want to do that anymore because they're going to have to pay a lot of capital gains tax. The other impact it'll have on the housing market is those bigger investors that are normally buying these bigger buildings and then when they sell them are going to have a large amount of profit that is higher than that $500,000 amount, are instead going to shift their focus from those big buildings that have a lot of profit to a lot of 2, 3, 4 unit buildings that will keep them under that $500,000 threshold when they eventually want to sell and do a 1031 exchange. So there'll be a lot of big time investors when you, a small time investor like me, is trying to compete with them and you'll get beaten out. So it's going to get even more competitive if you're trying to buy the single family up to that 4 unit building. Now it's obviously great that the government wants to have better infrastructure and make education more accessible as well as have free education for people in preschool. I think all of those are great things. And the way they're going about it on the surface seems to make sense with these 1031 exchanges and taxing the wealthy. It just seems like they're not really taking into account some of the trickle-down economic effects that may happen or how it may affect the housing market in general. So the real question is, will this proposal actually pass? And it's something that the administration talked about before they were actually elected, so it's very possible that people have been talking about it for a long time and have been thinking about it. And right now in the US government, there is a crazy slim majority for the Democrats who are more likely going to be more in favor of this, where probably every single Republican is not going to be interested in signing this into law. But there are also a lot of moderate Democrats that are probably leaning on the fence. So in my opinion, I think something will change with the 1031 exchange as well as the step-up tax basis, but not at the current proposal. Something needs to happen in order for the government to gain revenue for all of this money that they're printing to pump into infrastructure, into education, and all of these things that they want to do for the American economy. The reason why I don't think it'll pass as is because so many of these people who are sitting there making those decisions are the ones who own property and benefit from this tax code. The other thing that is important to note is this proposal could potentially be reversed if it is passed under the current administration. It could be reversed under the next administration. So if you have that $400,000 duplex and you gain more than that $500,000 taxable amount, but it takes you more than the 4 years that the current administration is in the government for, or 8 years, however long that they're in, then it doesn't really matter. It could potentially not affect you whatsoever. I hope this video helped you guys understand the 1031 exchange as well as some of the economic effects that surround the current world versus the proposed world. Don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, share with your friends so more people can get a better understanding of this stuff. Thanks for watching and hope to see you guys next time.